Vlog Brothers just uploaded a video. It says, this is a video about pineapples. I want to watch that, but I have to edit this first. So this year, I spent way too much money on books to do a bunch of reviews for horror stories and such around Halloween. Didn't read all of them, and things have just not gone as planned, but, you know, hey, I'm happy to make my final video on the subject and move on, because I've been on this since, like, September, and I kind of want to work on some other things now, too. But I've had a lot of fun, and I have nearly as many things to go over as I thought I would, but I should have known better, because I don't read fast, so, and other stuff happens in life. So I've got a few extras that I read in months prior to September and October, just because I've literally only got 4 books to talk about, if I only talk about the ones that I read specifically for this. So, Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. I wouldn't call it horror, I'm gonna be clear about that, but it's got some nice moments that kind of creep you out a bit, and it's just a great, wonderful fantasy story that is mildly autobiographic, from what I understand, and it's only, it is 178 pages. Really, if you just sit down on a day off, you can read the whole thing. I do actually quite recommend it. I'm trying to think what I can say about it that won't spoil too much. It's about a boy who goes to visit his friend who lives at the end of the lane, and they have an ocean in their backyard. Well, they call it an ocean. It's a pond, but there's something different about the pond, and some crazy stuff happens. Fun story. I quite genuinely recommend it. Sundog by Stephen King. This is another thing I find interesting, is that this, I suppose it's probably, like, based on a word count. I don't know what the precise number is, if it gets like 40,000 words, like, this is definitely a novel now. But this one is considered a novel. This one, about the same size, considered a novella. It was part of, this one's 193 pages, but the font, everything, doesn't always match up precisely. But this one was originally part of this, I got it downstairs, I can't remember the name of it, I haven't read it. I just read this bit out of it. I didn't know this was in it when I bought this. But this big collection of Stephen King short stories and novellas. It's like that thick. But anyway, this was a fun one. It's about a boy who gets a camera. Is it? I wanted to make sure that I remember the proper type of camera. Polaroid Sun 660. I didn't have that camera as a kid, but I did have a Polaroid, so when he was talking about how when you push the button and you hear the little whir, I could definitely hear that, and then imagine the photo slowly developing and all that, yeah, because I really loved my Polaroid as a kid. By then, it was getting to the point where they were just about to come out with, if they weren't already just barely starting to come out with the digital cameras. And then eventually everybody got smartphones that had decent memory storage and could take good photos, so now digital cameras aren't even so big a thing. But even when I got my Polaroid, it was arguably not the most economical way to take pictures. But it was really fun. It has nothing to do with the book. The book is about this kid, and he gets a camera for his birthday, and he goes to take a trial photo, you know, of his family standing there from the cake. And he takes a picture, and out prints a picture of a dog standing in front of a fence. And his dad's like, oh, that's weird, we're gonna have to take this back. And the son's like, no, I kinda wanna think on it. Because he got this kind of odd feeling when he took the picture. Not necessarily scary, not at this point, but just, I wouldn't say wonder precisely, but just something that he's like, oh, let me think on it. So he continues to take pictures, and continues to be pictures of the dog by the fence. Bit by bit, he starts to notice that the positioning of the dog is slightly different. Like, it starts to turn its head ever so slightly, and the kid's like, well, I want to get rid of this camera. And then, I don't know how much this one is spoil for you. Because then you'd say, well, okay, why didn't you just smash the camera and that'd be the end of the story? Anyway, I'll just spoil a tiny bit more. Somebody swaps the camera and continues to take pictures because they're trying to, like, sell it. But anyway, it makes sense in the context of the story, but then you're sitting there thinking, like, dude, you're gonna screw this up. The dog is gonna turn further and further, and it starts to growl, and you're like, this dog's gonna come out the camera, stop taking pictures, dummy. And that's the story. I'm not gonna say any more. Fun story. Sundog, Stephen King. Scary Stories Still in the Dark is next. If you were a kid in the 90s, or I don't know, time after that, 2000, it's probably still in schools. I'm trying to, I don't know, have these fun illustrations that are very memorable to where if this book was around when you were a kid, you remember it even years later because the art was very interesting. As for the stories, it's not, it didn't terrify me. I'm an adult, you know, but there was just enough. It was enough that I'm sitting thinking if I had sat down and read this one, I've got the other two, I haven't read them yet. If I had read them as a kid, they would have terrified me. like they're just intense enough that I'd be like, yeah, that is good horror for children. If your aim is to scare children, but in a kind of safe environment, but that they nonetheless get the heebie-jeebies, that'd be a good place to start. Really fun. Brought back memories, even though I didn't properly read them as a kid. And I keep tapping this thing, I'm sorry. I forget how well the speaker picks up noises, so sorry. No, it was really fun. And I went and saw the movie, too, which I quite enjoyed it. Other people, I've heard mixed opinions from different people that saw it, but I went in with low expectations, so I was like, oh yeah, this is a really fun movie. So yeah, check that out too. Last up is sorry, not technically last up of the ones that I read for this thing. It'd be The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I really, really enjoyed that one. I was surprised at just how much I enjoyed it. And here's the thing of it. It's like 78 pages long, something like that. And it's not until you get to, well, page 60. No, well, okay. It's like 78 pages. It's not until page, like, 58 that it is outright revealed well, I'm not gonna say it in case somehow you live under a rock. I'll let you be surprised, but you probably already know the general premise of this book. The thing that, because all of us who've grown up hearing about it and seeing kind of references to it, just in different, there was an episode of Tom and Jerry that had it. There was been different horror movies, different fantasy movies or whatever that have made reference to Mr. Hyde, and his particular relationship with Dr. Jekyll. So that's all we know. We don't know any of the specifics of the story, but we knew the general concept of it. What we consider the general concept of it. But what we consider the general concept of it isn't revealed until toward the end of the story, and I'm sitting there thinking that if I was reading this back in the 1800s, I would have been like, holy smokes! When I read this, it would have been like, I don't know, when people got to toward the end of, The Sixth Sense. That was like The Sixth Sense of the 18 whenevers it came out. It doesn't actually tell me the year. It's a very cheap printing of it. It does not tell me when the year that the book came out. There's like no copyright information. I mean, you don't technically need copyright information when it's like public domain, but I just mean usually you'll see it. It'll like say, because that particular, they'll be like, this is our particular version of it, so it's copyrighted to this year, like you can't upload images of it online or whatever. Not that that was a thing when that came out, because, I mean, 2 for $1 at Walmart, pretty sure that someone bought that in like the 90s. But, ow, bug. Sorry, cat claw got me. But that's just astonishing to me how long he waits in the story to reveal it, because most of us are like, no, that's just the concept of it. And it's making me think, if, 100 years from now, if anyone is still talking about the Sixth Sense, they almost certainly won't be. But if there are any references to it, it will just be the reveal at the end. It won't be like the story itself. The surprise of it all will be lost. But anyway, I thought it was really well written, and I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was an interesting examination into the human capacity for good and evil. And it was just fun, and it was short, and if you can get over slightly archaic prose, it's not nearly so bad as reading like Nathaniel Hawthorne, for instance. And, it's Shakespeare's leagues ahead of... No, I'm not knocking Shakespeare, I'm just saying that Shakespeare does not sound like how people talk now. That's all I'm saying. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is closer, I would say, to being in a style that is more readily readable to those not as familiar with older ways of talking or writing. So yeah, really enjoyed that one. So I got a couple of bonuses. The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman, which, this is written for children, but it's, again, probably not as much as Coraline, which I haven't read, but if it's anything like the movie Coraline, seems like it'd be a very scary book for children. In fact, he was told there was no market for it when he was writing it. They were wrong, but nonetheless. This one I wouldn't say would be as horrific as Coraline might to very young children. It follows this kid, Nobody Owens. And the story literally starts with the murder of his family. Like, it's off page, or it's off screen, so to speak, but it's very heavily implied, and you're just like, oh, okay. Nothing like a good children's book starting with a murder. And he gets adopted by some ghosts in a graveyard, and each chapter kind of discusses a different adventure that he goes on. I won't say that there's no connection between the different chapters, but it's not episodic, it's almost episodic. But it's a really fun one. This, definitely not horror, but I read it for the Barnes & Noble YA book club. As if that's hard to remember, I still had to read the sticker because I'm brain dead today. It was pitched as, a lot of people refer to it as kind of like Lord of the Flies, but with girls. These girls are all-girl high school, possibly junior high too, I don't know. Anyway, on this peninsula, and some sort of virus broke out, and it messed with the trees, and it messed with the animals, and it messed with the girls, and they would get certain changes to their bodies. It's not just a euphemism for talking about going through puberty. But yeah, some strange stuff, some weird, like one person, they get this scaly arm with sharp tips here, and other people, like one person's spine kind of grew out their body a bit. Different things happen with different people. And then the animals on the island are much bigger and more dangerous than before, and the trees almost seem more alive than they typically do, in a way that sort of freaks you out. Fun. I'd give a 3.5. Fun book. This also not horror, but I'm just mentioning it because people think of like witches and stuff, because Halloween. I read this one for the Barnes & Noble YA book club as well, although I very much hesitate to call this young adult. And perhaps I'll make a video on it explaining why. It's a story about a girl who's a witch who, I'm not going to give you the details exactly, but basically it benefits them both. It's sort of a political marriage, yeah. This girl's a witch who then marries a guy who's a witch hunter who doesn't know she's a witch, and antics ensue. It's a long book, perhaps a little longer than it needs to be, but I will say it was probably the easiest, like, 500-page book that I've read, where it actually felt like it went fairly quickly. I don't know. There'll be a second one, so, like, because of that, it felt like they more or less wrapped things up, but there's still, like, different different things hanging open yet, to where I'd have to read the second one as well to feel like my opinion of the first one is proper. Anyway, it was a pretty fun book. I liked it more than Wilder Girls, but it's not gonna make like my all-time top 50 books, you know. But yeah, fun book. Not sure I recommend it. I wouldn't recommend it for younger teenagers, put it that way. Last up is A Midnight Stroll by Travis McBee, which, full confession, I haven't read this whole thing. But I wanted to mention the first story in it. I didn't realize it was literally the first story in there. The Boy Who Melted, which you can buy this, or you can, I got this as a print book. I'm assuming, I don't know why you wouldn't, you know, have a Kindle version available, or you can just buy the story itself, I'm pretty sure, on Kindle, if you don't want the whole collection. The general concept of it was that there was this boy who, ever since he was a baby, if raindrops hit his skin, it's basically like you poured acid on him. It will genuinely just kind of melt and dissolve and destroy whatever part of his body the raindrops hit, and it's not water. It's not like he has like some weird jacked up water allergy. Like, he can take showers, he can take baths, he can drink water, he can do all sorts of stuff. Also, on a side note, you're not jacked up if you have a water allergy. That is a thing that exists, but it doesn't melt your skin, it just makes you break out in hives, and it's external only. You're okay. Trying to not insult people with illnesses. That's just trying to cover my bases here on that. But anyway, it was a really interesting concept, and I wouldn't say it's my favorite short story of all time, by any means, but I thought at least certain components of the execution made it a fun read. Because I thought he described very well just how messed up it would be if you know, like, it just really dug in deep, wanted to know you to understand the amount of pain and potential just for horror, and why you wouldn't want to leave the house if your flipping hand can melt. If it starts to sprinkle outside, you know. So, fun story. Check that out if you're interested. That's all I've got. Here's a Bagheera. Look at your camera. Look at your camera, Bagheera. Look. Here's a Bagheera. Look over here. Goodbye.